The Weber State Weekly Volleyball Show. We are a member of the Big Sky Podcast Network. I'm your host on this one, Colby Peterson. On the show today, we have our returning champion, our knowledgeable expert, guy who knows a lot more about volleyball than Colby Peterson. His name, David Moore. David, glad to have you back, man.
Oh, thanks for having me back. Yeah, I date back to the 70s for volleyball, so I've got old school knowledge.
Well, the knowledge is still good, man. You guys, you should see some of the things that David puts in the chat. And he's like, hey, what about this? What about this? And it's like, man, this guy's really watching. So glad to have David on to kind of break stuff down and a deeper analysis than I could provide. So really appreciate you, man. Let's talk a little bit about today's show. We're going to do match analysis, of course. So we'll talk a little bit about the loss to Montana State on Thursday night, stunning sweep. And then we'll talk a little bit about senior night against Montana to wrap up the regular season. Then we'll look forward to this week's matches, which will be the conference tournament, the Big Sky Conference Tournament in Ogden. So at Club Swenson, Wildcats will be playing Montana State in the first round. But we'll talk about the scenarios and kind of the way things have shooken out at the end of regular season conference play on Saturdays. And then, of course, we'll talk about potential prospects beyond the Big Sky tournament. So we'll get into all that. Before we do, though, encourage everyone, subscribe to the show, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, all good places to find us. We're on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And we have our Patreon. Go to patreon.com/Weber State Weekly. Really appreciate our Patreon supporters, our patrons. You folks are the best. We really appreciate your support. And so thank you so much. So now, David, let's talk a little bit about, let's start with the Montana State match, because I think, like I said, I don't think anybody expected the Bobcats to come into Ogden and sweep, right? I don't think that, of course, the Wildcats wanted to win these two last matches to continue to put pressure on Northern Colorado. They still needed some help. They still needed Northern Colorado to drop one of the final matches, but losing to Montana State was stunning. I mean, you were in the gym on Thursday night. Talk to me a little bit about the general feeling and kind of the way that the match kind of went, which ended up 3-0 in favor of the Bobcats.
Yeah, I thought the team was definitely off in the first set. I was watching the setting from Kate, and how well you can run the middle is really the measure of success of a team. When Weber is running their middle successfully, it's unstoppable. That's why.
Yeah. We've seen it with Tane, we've seen it with Bale, we've seen it with Bailey. Yeah, like those when set properly, those balls are just undiggable, right? Like you just can't.
Right, and it's really hard to block too, because you have to commit block, and that's, as Maya said last week, that's not the strategy that teams necessarily use. They want to wait and see where the set goes before blocking. If you start commit blocking to the middle because you're running it all the time, then you start getting one-on-one situations outside, and you have an easy time there as well. But to be able to run those good middles, you need accurate passes, and you need your setter to be on. And I didn't feel like Kate really got warmed up until the very end of that first set. So, rolling into the second set, it's like, okay, now we're doing a little better, but it still, wasn't quite good enough. And so, and then the other thing that happened was that Macy played libero the first set, and with the passing not being great, Maya did what he does a lot, which is swap liberos out, and went over to Charlie, and then she wasn't doing fantastic in the second set. She was doing pretty well, but ended up losing that set. And so, Michaela got pulled back into the libero spot, And I was there with a big group of friends, and I said, okay, now we're going to see Michaela, who's our most experienced libero, ran out to a massive lead,
Yeah.
and then not so much.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about this. That first set, like you said, the offense struggles. They just don't able. They're just not able to string together a good size run. It was always just onesie twosies at a time, and unfortunately, on the other side of the net, Montana State had 3 runs of 3-0 or more. They had 2 3-0 runs, and they had a big 5-0 run. And that 5-0 run was really the difference in the match because they just never could get it down, and whittle away at it because they were only getting 1 or 2 points back at a time before giving up another. And so the lead remained around 4 for the rest of the match. And so I kind of wanted to ask you, like, what was it offensively that was holding the Wildcats back? You talked about Kate not maybe being quite warmed up. The sets, the passing was a little bit difficult to run the offense. And so did you feel that like that was the key? Like, what was it about those passes and that set and the setting that made it difficult to run the offense the way that the coaching staff had hoped?
So, uh, there's an analogy that I've mentioned to you before that I sort of think of Kate as Weber's Taysom Hill.
Okay.
That I think she's actually perhaps the best player on the team, the best pure volleyball player on the team,
Very
because
versatile.
she can set, she can dig, she
She can
can block
serve.
cover,
Yeah.
and
She's got a few
the
kills to her name as
skill
well.
that right, she'll pound the ball, she'll get solo blocks. Um, what I like most is how her mind works. It's kind of your first step in volleyball that can be very helpful. If you're there in the moment and you can immediately react, you can go chase down some errant ball. So, the person that's picking up blocked balls or running into the announcer's table the most is Kate. And that's because boom, she's off and running as soon as something happens. Um, on the other hand, like a quarterback that Taysom wants to be, or a setter that Kate's trying to be, the great natural setters have just these soft hands, and boom, the set comes out not necessarily in the direction you're expecting.
Mm.
Um, uh, just because it's all in the last motion. And so I like having Kate as setter because, she calms down the point every time. She had an amazing super physical set that she saved off the net against Montana. Um, and she does not leave her hitters hanging or give them trap sets that much where they're right up against the block where they know they're going to get, you're going to get stuffed.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, there it is. And the block's loving that one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, she hasn't gotten called for bad hands that much after she was playing last season. She would get called for bad hands a lot last season when she was just subbing in. And it's I think she's done really well. She's been called some, but not that much. But she doesn't really have those pure soft hands of a setter.
Yeah.
So it's, you want to have her in, you want to have her playing, touching the ball as much as possible. Is she going to be the league leading setter? No, she's not.
Yeah. But like you said, improvement from last year to this year, testament to her hard work and the work of the coaching staff with her. Um, Talking a little bit more about the Montana State match. Second set, kind of more of the same, but third set was kind of the backbreaker. And like you said, this is really where I was surprised because I had actually been out walking the dog, or no, I was about to leave to walk the dog. That's what it was. And so the Wildcats they get an absolutely massive run. They go up 21-10, and it's like, oh, this one's over. Okay, this is going to 4, right? Like, okay, we're going to get back on track here. Wildcats were in need of a reverse sweep because they'd gone down 2-0. But it's not
And they
impossible.
even got to 23-12. That was
got-
the even further point where they just needed to. And since it was senior weekend, Riley got to get in and play some during that match because Maya's like, okay, this one's over. I can give my other senior a chance to play.
Right. But the Bobcats answer, and they go on this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-0 run. And it's just absolutely a killer. And then after that 8-0 run, they follow it up with another 6-0 run to close the match out and close the set out, which ends up closing the match out as well. And so it's a hard pill to swallow when, the Wildcats were up so big in that set. I mean, it was just like, yeah, this set's over. I come back and I'm like, we got swept? Like, what the freak happened?
Yeah.
And so I think the other thing, too, is last week we talked about how Montana State, not a great road team in conference this year, right? They had only had 2 wins on the road up to that point. That was their 3rd win in conference play on the road all season. And it comes at Club Swenson in a really critical time where the Wildcats needed every win they could get. And so what do you make of that collapse, David? As we've talked about, and we'll talk about it here in just a bit, about how conference tournament is coming up. The Wildcats have had some very awesome games, and they've had some very not awesome games. And so it's very, very up and down, lots of learning this season with this crop of fresh women. What do you make of that 3rd set and kind of its impact overall as we move into not just the next match against Montana, but beyond into the conference tournament?
Right. Well, I saw the quote after the game from Maya that he was embarrassed by the effort, which was not what I was noticing in the gym. I knew that they're in not one of their better rotations because for all of those points, Kate's in the front row. So and so's Danny. So they really mainly have 2 hitting options, right? Danny and Bailey. Nobody's coming out of the back row. I mean, earlier in the match, they had Emma hitting out of the back row there, but they never brought her back in. They just were leaving defense in. And so I went and looked and said, oh, is it really lame effort? And so I rewatched that whole sequence to look at where they were losing points or losing advantage. And I thought the problem could be narrowed down to the passing, the setting, and the hitting.
Okay, so the offense
there
wasn't running.
were errors everywhere. Either inaccuracies or downright errors. The whole thing broke down.
Yeah.
So you couldn't really just go and say, oh yeah, this one thing is what failed. So I mean, I didn't think it was effort per se, but I'm wrong about plenty of this stuff. So maybe Maya was right.
Sure. One thing I noticed, as I went back and looked at some of the stats, because I was just like stunned at that. I was like, how did we lose? Montana State's offensive numbers, not amazing on Thursday night, right? It's not like they were just this overpowering offense that just absolutely, you look at the result of the match and go, 3-0. Wow, they must have really did a number on the Wildcats, but the tail of the tape is a little bit different. And so I was like, I feel like this was a match where the Wildcats lost, not necessarily that the Bobcats won, right? Giving up an 8-0 run, following by another 6-0 run. There were also opportunities in previous sets, in sets 1 and 2, where the Wildcats had gone up and allowed the Bobcats once again to get back in, or they had gotten behind because the offense just wasn't producing the way it normally does. Look at all that and go, it's not defense. It's the Wildcats on their side of the net, not necessarily running the system the way that they would like to. And that's the thing that's costing the game. And so in my mind, it felt like this is a match that was lost by the Wildcats, not necessarily won by the Bobcats.
Yeah, when the passing's off, that makes the whole offense run worse. But in this case, I mean, there were errors all along, and later in the match, that I don't think they got many of their blocks, which is really the team's strong point. So
yeah, we talked about that a lot. So the Wildcats fall to the Bobcats, stunning 3-0 sweep, which really had an impact on the hopes for maybe an opportunity at a share of the conference trophy, the regular season conference trophy. Not to be with that loss to Montana State. I don't think anybody thought Northern Colorado was going to lose 2 that weekend, and they won both. So it was pretty much out. And so
can't
then,
have every weekend where the top teams go lose.
yeah,
I guess it was Portland State that's had the late losses. I mean, Northern Colorado is on an 11-match winning streak after their 2-3 start. So
right, but like, okay, it's an 11-match winning streak, but there have been moments like people look at that and go, 11-match winning streak. It's like, yeah, but let's drill down. Like, they have not looked invincible. We talked about their almost loss before we started. We talked about their almost loss to an Eastern Washington in Cheney. Their almost loss to the Wildcats at the bank in Greeley. Stuff like that, where it's like, yes, they won, but they didn't win convincingly in all 11 of those games. There's more.
Right.
There's more there. So let's talk about senior night then. So the Wildcats lose that one. It's a heartbreaking defeat, not what you wanted. But they move on to Saturday night at Club Swenson for our 2 seniors, Emma Mangum and Riley Weinert. And so senior night, Wildcats come out in force, man. They just absolutely dominated that first set and win it 25-9. I wanted to ask you, did you feel that how much of that did you feel was scheme, or how much of it do you feel was emotion, either coming from Thursday night's loss or just the elation of senior night?
Yeah, I definitely thought it was senior night.
Sure.
Just like last season, Maya starts his seniors, so Riley got to start in place of Danny. And the normal sub is that Riley plays for Emma. And so you can't really take Emma out to put Riley at opposite. So so she was playing out of position, not that it's that much different to play outside hitter versus playing opposite. And so what did they go out to? A 7-0 run, I think, to start the game.
Yeah.
And just rolled. So I thought it was all, I think if you're on the Montana side of that, it's like they're having their senior night. We have to withstand the initial blast and then fight back.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe not withstand the initial blast, but we have to not get discouraged by how hot they're going to come out, which I thought they did.
Well, yeah, because like this match is told in a series of 3, or this set, the first set is told in a story of 3 key runs. Like you said, that 7-0 run to start the set. Then later, the Wildcats go on another 6-0 run to go up 21-8, and then they close it out on a 4-0 run. And so it's just a nice way to set the tone on senior night. And so I just kind of wondered, like, what fueled this? Because, man, it was something to behold. And it was like, here's the team that we've seen and moments during the season that has really been able to go toe to toe with anybody in the conference, even though there have been some disappointing losses like to Idaho State, where it's just like, man, can't believe that game just didn't, that slipped away. So.
Right. But that first run was with Riley in, so it definitely seemed like it was a senior night effect.
Yeah. After the first set, the things tighten up just a little bit, and it's a little bit more close for the rest of the match. The Wildcats gave up some big runs to the Grizz in especially that second set where the Grizz ended up pulling it out. How does that make you feel with tournament play this week, where the Wildcats have had this they've had this problem in the past couple of weeks of giving up those big runs and allowing teams back in when they've done a relatively good job of building up strong leads. and putting themselves in a position to win, those runs are just kind of a killer because it's like you want to stop the bleeding. And sometimes it hasn't been the case. How does that leave you feeling as we get ready for conference play this week?
Well, I think it leaves me feeling the same way the whole season has. It's a young team. Sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. Uh, uh, you're kind of hoping that they would roll together some momentum to carry into the conference tournament. And okay, well, one match of momentum is all they're going to get because they didn't even manage the whole weekend solid, right? So
Yeah.
you're going to get what you're going to get. I mean, we're doing well for how freshman loaded our team is. And do I think that we can march through our rematch against Montana State that just swept us, our rematch against Portland State that swept us twice, and then a match against Northern Colorado? That is a pretty tall ask.
Tall task. Yeah. I mean, those are aside from the Idaho State match, those are the only 3 teams in the conference to beat you. Montana State on Thursday night, Portland State twice, both sweeps, and of course the Northern Colorado match just a week ago that went 5. So it's tough because this is like a kryptonite path to the championship, right? Where it's like,
Right. Well, I'm going to go watch all 4 matches tomorrow, and I think I'm rooting for some underdogs.
Certainly.
If you guys just want to go ahead and knock out Portland State and Northern Colorado, I got no problem with that.
Yeah, we don't hate that. Last note here on this Grizz match before we move on to talking a little bit more about the conference tournament this week. Bailey Bodley and Emma Mangum they led the way in kills against the Grizz. Do you think that Montana schemed a little bit to limit Danny Richens in this one, or did you feel that maybe it was just maybe an off night for her because she's been really good the last few weeks, especially last weekend, or was it the week prior where we were on the road, but she's just had some really, really good weeks in the past, 3-4 weeks of the season. And so I wondered, like, is it that Montana saw the need or the opportunity to try and stop her offensive game and mate them? And in this case, it was Emma Mangum and Bailey Bodley.
Well, so there were lineup games going on, but I think that was somewhat trying to worry about where Paige Clark was relative to her opposition. I think you want to not get Paige lined up against Emma all the time. Although it was Weber that moved their lineup around more. After the first set, they Montana kept the same lineup the rest of the time, and Weber kept shifting a bit. So, but about Danny having a really good match with a lot of kills. And I mean, if you look at last season where Danny and Ashlyn had massive amounts of kills, I don't love it. Weber gets stuck setting the outside a lot, and the fewer kills that Danny has and the more that go to the middle and to Emma means that they're getting their good passing and able to mix it up. And so
keeping the defense on it.
Right, and it's resting Danny, not using her up for the whole season. So I have no problem with Danny having a down night,
right,
where other players are carrying the load.
Yeah, especially like you said. I mean, it takes a lot to jump up and up over and over and over again. When we had Danny Richens on this season to talk a little bit about it, she talked about the effect that it has on your body, and you definitely do. It's a lot to constantly play at that level. She's played at an MVP level, and so if there's a game like this where Emma Mangum and Bailey Bodley can take some of that load and the Wildcats can continue to win, great, especially as we get ready for conference tournament play.
Right. Oh, the other thing that we didn't talk about was in the end of the Montana State match and in this Montana match, they started doing more bringing in Ashley as a blocking sub in the front row for Michaela. So when Michaela's not playing libero and she's playing outside hitter, she's not as big a blocker. And so later in the games, Maya kept subbing while Weber was serving, stick Ashley in, and while the other team was serving, have Michaela in because she's such a good passer. And I don't know that had been used that much earlier in the season, but it is a good innovation that was used later in the Montana State game and then in Montana. So I'm expecting to be seeing that again in the rematch, and I think that will help.
Yeah, after the match, a little bit of audio from both Maya and Emma Mangum, and so we'll hear quote here from Maya on this senior class. Like we said, Emma Mangum and Riley Weiner both playing their final regular season matches at Club Swenson, of course, because of the way things worked out. They'll get to play the conference tournament on their own floor one more time. But here's what Maya had to say about the seniors on Saturday night.
Hope that they can learn from the good and the bad from tonight. Like, we did not play the cleanest game of volleyball, but I think the big thing that we consistently try to get our kids to do is learn from experience. And so if we learn how to handle our emotions and handle failure the right way, then today's a good day for us.
Perfect.
So there's Maya talking a little bit about the performance on Saturday and about, not the cleanest game, but continuing to learn. And that's been the theme all year with this group of folks. And so the seniors trying to show them the way and kind of turn the reins over to the next group.
Not the cleanest match, but with that vacuum cleaner going, Club Swenson was getting clean.
It was. Those folks wanted to get ready. They wanted to go home. It was Saturday night, baby. We also got some quote from Emma Mangum on how big it will be playing on your home floor for the conference tournament, which we'll talk about here in just a second. But here's what Emma Mangum had to say about playing one more time, playing the conference tournament at Club Swenson this week.
It's not as important as how we go out there and compete. I mean, yeah, it's our home floor, but that just means we just go out there and we compete even harder. We just protect our floor, but it doesn't matter where we are as long as we're together as a team.
Good point there. It doesn't matter where. We talked about this last week with Maya about the fact that when the Wildcats won their championship in the spring season, and they won that on the floor of Bank of Colorado Arena in Greeley, Colorado. Didn't matter where they were. They played well, and they beat the Bears in the championship game on their own floor to win the rings and get an opportunity to represent the Big Sky Conference at the NCAA tournament that year. But David, I wanted to ask you, you've been to every match at Club Swenson this season. How big of an advantage do you think it is for these ladies to play in front of the home crowd?
Well, I've heard them say that that they've felt the crowd carrying them. So I I think that will be a benefit. The problem with their Friday match is it's right when I am hosting a charity event, so this is going to be the first one I'll miss.
That's okay. It's for charity.
Season. So, yep.
Yeah, it's for charity.
Yep.
So the Wildcats, just some stats here on the end of the regular season before we talk about the conference tournament here. This is the fifth consecutive year now that the Wildcats have won at least 17 games. Quite a mark. I mean, marked improvement if you're a fan of Wildcat volleyball. In previous decades, Maya's really done a good job of keeping this team consistent, not necessarily just one high point, but consistently playing at a high level, winning the number 3 seed in the conference this season in a year where we knew that there were going to be a lot of growing pains. And so a nice mark there. Weber State also, we talked about it throughout the season that defensively, this was a great year for them. They ended up being 13th in the nation in blocks per set. They ended up being 20th in the nation and holding opponents to a 165 hitting average. And they also averaged 16.18 digs per set, which was 35th best in the country. They lead the conference in all of those stats. So, David, I know you had a couple of stats you wanted to throw in as well in terms of just overall strength of the Wildcats this season.
Well, those were actually the stats that I was talking about. Was mainly that blocking stat. I've created the new hashtag Wildcats that I'm hoping to spread around and reuse next year. Because with that big lineup, they've done a tremendous job blocking. And I mean, 13th in the country out of over 300 teams in Division I. That's awesome. I don't think that's quite as high as they were. How was the team at the end of the season last year in aces? I know Danny finished like number 2, right? But
yeah, but
where the team was like in top 20 near the end, right?
Yeah,
I can't. Lower.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact number, but I mean, definitely one of the upper echelon teams in the country when it came to service line play. I mean, that's where hashtag Ace State came from. You know, in the tradition now of flipping the ace over the balcony there at Club Swenson because they were so
we need some
dumb.
block symbols, though.
Hey, you know, I'm definitely very much for it because it is, like you said, a calling card of this new lineup that has been recruited now. This young group, very good,
and who's coming in future years too.
Yeah,
right. I mean, is more tall women. So.
Yeah, I mean, really excited for the recruits that have signed thus far. I mean, it's going to be a really talented team up front with who's there now, plus who's coming in next year. So looking forward to it, man. But David, I think you had some RPI numbers as well. Talk a little bit about this team, kind of where they are at overall, along with other teams in the Big Sky Conference.
Well, you had the question you were going to lead up to, which is if the Wildcats can't claim the conference title or the tournament title and get the NCAA bid, what it was going to take for them to claim an NIVC spot.
Yeah.
And so I looked up the volleyball RPI index, and for the Big Sky teams, Northern Colorado's at 103, Portland State's at 122, Weber's at 132, and we won't worry about the Montana teams. But
don't even talk about them.
Nope. But what isn't the NCAA 64 and then the NIVC is another 64, so nominally you'd be looking at like 128 teams getting in. So Weber's right now, on the outside of that looking in. So they definitely have to have a good showing, make it to the finals, and challenge, I think, to be able to claim an NIVC bid.
Yeah, climb up a little bit more in those rankings, right? But before we look too far into a potential NIVC or an NCAA tournament bid, let's talk a little bit about today. The conference announced individual awards. Danny Richens claiming a first-team all-conference spot, well-deserved. The former conference MVP. She's had a very good season at outside hitter and also been versatile. Has played some libero this season as well because of need.
When she was injured.
Yeah. Well, also you just they've had to move some things around because of injuries on the roster, and it's been a short bench this year, and so she's been willing to do her part. But Michaela Sorensen and Emma Mangum also named to the second team all conference. Did you feel anybody else on the team maybe should have gotten a nod, or were you overall fairly happy with the way that individual awards shook out this year?
I think I'm happy with that. I mean, it's really nice that Michaela claimed a spot as a libero / outside hitter. How many libero / outside hitters are there?
Not too many.
Right. Yeah, I still want to see her wearing the libero jersey, accidentally just take a kill from the back. It's like, oh, sorry. What are you gonna do? I forgot. But and then every time Macy's been subbing back row for Emma, and every time we're sitting on that bench and Emma subs back in, I'm always saying to my wife, why doesn't Macy get any front row time? I don't know.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, for Michaela, I think that's a great recognition of her really switching from a pure libero role last year and taking on some of those outside hitting duties, and then having to switch back and forth. In terms of
In
most
the same
costume
match.
changes, she would have she would dominate the rest of the Big Sky, I think.
Probably the case, because like you said, how many other teams are swapping out their outside hitter for libero position, midstream, as the sets go on.
Right.
So,
And it's been interesting. It's been, hey, we need an outside hitter, switch from libero to outside hitter. Hey, we need a libero, switch from outside hitter to libero. Both of those things have happened multiple times this year.
yeah. So now the Wildcats, the way things ended up, like we said, they end up with a 3 seed in the conference this year. So that puts them against the 6, which is Montana State, a team that just beat them on Thursday night. So an opportunity
Time for some revenge, baby.
revenge on Wednesday against them. And I believe the Wildcats have the 4th game. They'll be the last team to play. So that match will be at 7 o'clock. Yep, 7 o'clock on Wednesday night. And so it's interesting because it's a team that we've just seen a week ago, not 6 days prior. You lost to them on your own floor. Now you're playing them on your own floor again. What do you feel has to change in order for the result to be more like what the Wildcats got up in Bozeman earlier in the season?
I think that Weber State can clean up their act.
Me too. It's the potential's there.
I think they did different lineups every game. I thought that they did all right with getting Charlie her traditional libero role, having Michaela hit, but then subbing in Ashley sometimes on the front row. Because Ashley got subbed out of the outside hitter role some when she was getting blocked a bunch. She doesn't always use all of her height, but more in that spot role, I think that she'll do a good job, and so I'm looking forward to a much better performance.
Yeah. Like I said, I think it can be done. I think that they can clean up some of the things. Like we said in the previous segment, it's not like Montana State's offensive numbers on Thursday night were overwhelming. It's just a matter of the Wildcats running their system in the way that they want to, and I think they can find success. Comment here from Paul Dabbling saying, I like Macy. It seems like the teams are targeting her when she's on the floor in terms of service and other things. And so maybe getting a little bit quicker, anticipate her position a little bit better. That'll come. And that's right. Players grow, and that's a thing that will happen. And so it's a new.
Well, she was a star libero on her old team that she
Right.
transferred from.
Yeah.
The tricky thing with switching to a new team is when you're doing the service receive, you just have to communicate really well with the people next to you. And it takes time to do that. I was really surprised when there was a serve that went in between Danny and Michaela, because they've been playing so long together, that I wouldn't think they would have that miscommunication. Whereas when it's Charlie, when it's Macy, it's not always communicated as well. They've also been switching. The other thing I saw is they were playing a lot of 4-person service reception, where traditionally they've just done 3 across. Um, but against some of the better servers, I think they're having more luck with going 4 across, which requires even more communication.
Yeah, I agree with you, David. It's just time in the system, getting comfortable with your teammates, working on some of those things. It's been an interesting year because of the need to rotate players out because of the short bench, but overall, feels like that's a thing that will improve as time goes on, and as quite a few of these folks get an opportunity to play their second year with this coaching staff in the program. So the winner of that match, Weber State versus Montana, gets the winner of either Portland State or Eastern Washington. Interesting thing here, Eastern Washington recently beat Portland State, who's kind of been slumping in the second half a little bit. They still got the number 2 seed. They got that on a tiebreaker, but Portland State has not looked as good as they did early in the conference slate. And so I wondered, like, can Eastern repeat the feat? And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to go back and look at kind of how they've been doing the last few weeks. And I saw some interesting things. They had a solid sweep against Northern Arizona in their building. They took Northern Colorado to 5 in Cheney. Northern Colorado needed the reverse sweep to overcome Eastern. They had gone up 2-0, and then Northern Colorado comes back and has to win it in 5. But just kind of showing the quality, I guess, or the growth of Eastern Washington, because they do have a first-year a new head coach in their first year. Also, a win against Portland State the week prior to that on the road in Portland. And so,
yeah, that was the one that I was really amazed about.
Yeah, and so all of this, just kind of like comes together because, like, before that, they've got a string of sweep. They ended up getting swept by a team like Idaho State, but they did have a win against Montana State in Cheney. So it feels like they play better in Cheney, but that one Portland State win on the road really kind of sticks out to me. And so I think that the interesting thing about this year's field is that there's a lot of parity in the Big Sky Conference overall this year. We've seen good teams like Northern Colorado lose to teams like Northern Arizona, or we've seen teams like Weber State lose to Idaho State. We've seen Portland State lose to the Eastern Washingtons. There's just a lot of anything can happen kind of going on this year. So do I think the Eastern can repeat the feat? Yeah, it's one match, and we've seen that anything can happen. Technically a neutral floor, it's not favoring one or the other, depending on how their fans travel. So could they repeat the feat? Yeah, I think they could, but time will tell how Portland State comes out, because they're very talented. That's a very talented team. They've swept the Wildcats twice this season. They're good, but it feels like maybe they've been having some challenges of late, trying to close the deal. So another
I'm looking forward to seeing that one.
Yeah, I think it'll be good. So other side of the bracket, Northern Colorado, hated rival, is playing Idaho State. I think Northern Colorado probably beats them, but I don't know. How are you feeling about that? Because like we just said, anything can happen. Idaho State has beaten Northern Colorado and Weber State this year.
Team on an 11-match winning streak, team on a 4-match losing streak. I think I'm going to go with the Northern Colorado there.
Sure, it's a safer bet, right?
Yeah. So use some of my chalk, right? Isn't that how you?
Yeah. So looking at, the bracket is relatively, like we said, there's parity there. So do you feel that one side of the bracket is tougher than the other?
I kind of think that the other side might be.
Yeah.
Because
Sac State playing Montana over on that side, plus Northern Colorado.
Montana's been having a good late season. I mean, we beat them, but
we talked about how they were surging and they were the 5 seed, right?
Right. And so in terms of late season surges, right, the 2 Montana teams did better. Northern Colorado did better after a slow start. Whereas Weber State's been up and down all season, and Portland State had that weak string. So so I kind of think that that the other side might be the tougher side. But ask me again tomorrow after I've seen how the matches go. Then I'll
Sure.
really be able to evaluate the teams.
I'll be feeling real good.
I'll probably post that. I'll probably post about it. So.
Oh, good. Yeah, I mean, and if you don't know, David usually posting those in the Weber State fans Facebook group. And so if you're not in
Right.
there, want to encourage you to get in there. It's a great group of fellow Wildcat fans who, of course, opportunities to talk volleyball, but also talking football, talking basketball. We talk a little bit of softball in there sometimes too. Just overall, things. We got some, Jeff Millard's dropping some memes in there. It's a good time. It's a good group of folks. And so if you're not in there, please go and find it. We usually include the link to that in our podcast description each and every week. So if you're not sure exactly how to link to it, just go to the description of any given podcast in the feed, and it will be there for you. So final question then, David, on this. Of course, we talked about the Wildcats' potential road to the conference championship. It is a rough one. It is a kryptonite path. Should they not make it and find themselves champions at the end of the bracket? We talked about
I think
their
they're going to
odds.
have to be playing on Saturday night.
You think?
If they want to get in the NIVC, but I don't know. I haven't seen that draw that many times. Maybe it'll be a different story, but I'm guessing that with all of the with our conference having so many losses and our top team only being 103rd ranked, right? That's gonna make it hard to get any NIVC spots out of there. It's not like you've got a bunch of good teams that have shown their quality all season. So
yeah,
I think that Weber should just go ahead and win the tournament, though. That's simpler.
Wouldn't mind getting the rings, right? Wouldn't mind that at all.
So are there rings? Or is it just an expression?
No, there are rings. 100% there are rings. Yeah, they really give them to him. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Next time you see Maya, ask him to see his. He's got them.
Okay.
He's got a few of them. But like we said, the third, so Wednesday, November 23rd, which is tomorrow, Wildcats will be taking on Montana State, 7 p.m. at Club Swenson. You can get your tickets at WeberStateSports.com, or you can watch it on ESPN Plus if you're like me and you're out of market. I know you'll probably be getting your Thanksgiving prepped, and so if you want to take a little break, head up to Club Swenson.
I'm taking a whole break. If you call up Weber State, you can get your tournament pass for $40 instead of $70 if you were buying the individual games. So for $40, I can go to all
every
7
game.
So
yep.
Sadly, like I said, I'm missing Friday night, but I'll be doing good things.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
So I'm planning to catch 6 out of 7.
Yeah. And if you do go to the match, make sure that you bring a sign. David and his wife have been bringing good signs, and so join them. Bring some good signs. We're very pro signs at Club Swenson.
That's right. We need more Wildcats signs.
Yeah. We'll wrap up the show. WeberStateWeekly@gmail.com if you want to email us your ideas. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and then Patreon, of course. And then WeberStateWeekly.com is the blog. Going to be revamping the website soon. It really needs it. So we'll work on that when Colby Peterson has time, which seems like never, but we'll see. David Moore, want to thank you so much for talking some volleyball with me here tonight. Hopefully we'll be talking about some good vibes next week this time. So until then, we'll wrap it up like we always do, man. Weber State.
Great.
Go Wildcats.